Hey everyone, it's Dave here. Just wanted to bring you a midweek devotional. I filmed a devotional a few months ago, but we put that on hold because in light of COVID, things change rapidly, and that the context of that video didn't really apply to the new context of where we were. So we put it on hold, but I wanted to circle back around and just resurface that conversation and resurface that Devo. And that question that we answered in that Devo. And the question that I want to answer today is, how do we live in community when there are different points of view? How do we live in community when we have and hold different convictions? There are some people that we love and appreciate, and we live in community that have one set of convictions, and then there is another group of people or another people that we love and we accept and that hold the different convictions. How do we live in harmony with each other? Well, the good news is the Bible does tell us how to do that. And today I just want to lead us to three different passages. Romans 14, Romans 12, and 1 Corinthians 13, because I think in those three passages, Paul tells us how we can interact, relate to each other in harmony with love, while still accepting and believing and affirming the various different convictions that we have. And so let me go to Romans chapter 14 first. Romans chapter 14, Paul is writing, it's a church plant in Rome. Rome is a secular city. It's a highly economic city, so you got a prominent city, but a city that has not really been evangelized. And so there's a church plant there. And so inside of this church, there are people that have never grown up in a Christian background, in a Jewish culture. And yet there are others in that church that have grown up in a Jewish background, Christian culture. And so that Jewish culture, that Christian culture, there were certain traditions and ways of worshiping that they held to. But there was others that never grew up in that. They never held to that. They didn't see that. They were rescued by Jesus. And so there was these traditions that would surface once in a while. And how do you live in harmony with that? And so Paul addresses that in Romans chapter 14. And so there's two main principles in Romans 14 before I read it. The two principles are this: be willing to lay down your rights for each other. For the sake of loving one another, be willing to lay down your rights. Are you on this side of your conviction? Will you willing to lay down your rights to meet in the middle? Are you on this side with your conviction? Be willing to lay down your rights and meet in the middle for the sake of love and unity. And the other one that Paul is going to address is that at the end of the day, we all have to stand before God, who is our ultimate judge. And so make sure that when you hold to a conviction, that first of all, it is a conviction that is godly, and two, that you are not playing and replacing God yourself as being the one who judges, that you're leaving that to God. So let's look at that very briefly. I'm going to read it and then pause it and read it along the way. So it says this in Romans 14: accept him whose faith is weak. So that word faith there is, you can translate that conviction, okay? Accept him whose faith is weak, without passing judgment on disputable matters. One man's faith allows him to eat anything, but another man whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. The man who eats everything must not look down on him who does not. And the man who does not eat everything must not condemn the man who does, for God has accepted him. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To his own master he stands or falls, and he will stand, for the Lord is able to make him stand. So pause there for a moment. So right there, Paul just gives us some indications of what we ought to do. One, let me just clarify this again. Faith, that could be referred to convictions that we hold into as convictions of faith. The weak believer is not necessarily less of a Christian, less of a person. It's just it's just referring to someone who has restrictions in the sense of, I can't do that because there's something inside of me that I feel wrong when I do it. The strong Christian is someone that is not bound by that. They are able to do that in their conviction. And so those are the different there. How do you work and interact? Well, Paul is very clear. It says, accept him. One of our responses is to accept. Make sure that you hear them, understand them, accept them, listen to them without passing judgment. So don't pass judgment. Accept them as a brother and sister and hear them, accept them without passing judgment on disputable matters. And it goes on, one man's faith allows you to eat, another man's faith who's weak does not allow them to eat. So what does Paul say? You must not look down on the other person. So don't look down. Don't think that they are wrong. Don't think that what they're doing is wrong. Understand where they are coming from. Understand their perspective. And then it goes on, and he also uses, do not condemn the other man. On these disputable matters, on the matters that aren't salvation matters, what Paul is saying, don't condemn the other person for the conviction that they have. And in fact, he would go on to say, allow you to meet in the middle, allow you to love your brother and sister in such a way that you can lay down your rights. So the first principle that Paul says is you hold to convictions. That is awesome. But be willing to lay down those convictions for the sake of one another so that you can meet in the middle for unity and love and a testimony to an outside world. So the first principle that Paul would say in Romans 14 is no matter if you're strong or weak, that's really not the point. The point is no matter who you are, no matter who you think you are, come to the middle by accepting each other, loving each other, listening to each other, and finding ways to live in love with each other. Paul goes on, and the last principle is that just remember, at the end of the day, it is God that is the judge. Hold to your conviction, but at the end of the day, remember that it is God that judges, not you. So we can hold to our convictions, and God wants us to hold to our convictions, but in disputable matters, we need to be able to come to the middle and release that and say, God, we're trusting in you. I'm trusting in you. At the end of the day, you're the judge. I'm going to seek unity. I'm going to seek love and trust you in this. So there is a very short and concise way of seeing Romans 14. The underlying premise here is love. Love your brother and sister. Love that they are convicted and hold to their convictions. But at the end of the day, allow love to rule, which is why Romans 12 is so important. Romans 12 verses 9 and onwards tell us how we ought to love one another, how we ought to live with this kind of love, how that love ought to be displayed through our actions. And so Paul goes on and he says, your love must be sincere. And I'm just going to draw some points of what our love should look like. Our love should be sincere, real, not fake. So you should not pretend to love someone. You ought to love someone in sincerity. So your love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. So make sure that when you love someone, you are pursuing their good and you are pursuing the overall good of that situation. That's what love displayed looks like. Goes on and says, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. What does love look like? Devotion. Hey, I realize you and I have different perspectives. I realize that we stand in different sides here, but that's not going to thwart us or stop us from loving each other. Be devoted. I'm devoted to you because you're a Christ follower. I'm devoted to you because Christ has saved you. I'm devoted to you, to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourself. So that word honor ought to be a display of our love for each other. I long to show you that I respect you. I want to show you that I love you. I want to show you that I value you. So honor one another and your perspective, your voice, your thoughts. Goes on, never lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Meaning, hold your convictions and hold it with zeal, but yet don't let that zeal run you off from serving God. What God wants you is to love one another and love your brother and sister. So have that zeal, but don't let that zeal be so strong that you are not really following God. It goes on and says, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. So there we see demonstrations of God's love, that we are to be patient. We ought to bring them to prayer. We ought to be generous with our time, generous with our hearing, generous with our understanding, and we are to open up our hearts and our lives and our homes to one another. We should never let anything divide us. So there is this, what love actually looks like. Then Paul goes on and says, how do you live in harmony with one another? How do you do that? And he goes on in the rest of this passage. Says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. So he's saying, bless them, be nice, don't reject them, accept them, make sure your words are blessing to them. Bless them, bless those who persecute you, do not curse, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. So meaning that, in times of rejoicing, rejoice with everyone. In times of mourning, mourn with them. So if someone on either side of the conviction is feeling something, understand their feeling and join with them, understand them, and don't lift up your rights above the other. Now it goes on, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud. And so how do you live in harmony? Well, you don't let pride rule. But be willing to associate with people of low standard. Notice another, do not be conceited. Do not repay evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it's up to you, live at peace with one another. And it says, do not take revenge. And so Paul gives us a few do nots. Make sure that in your living in harmony with others that you do not do these. These are wrong if you're doing them. What are wrong? Don't repay evil for evil. Don't take revenge. And don't be conceited, and don't be filled with pride. And so that's how we begin to live in harmony with each other. Paul, in another letter in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, again describes what love ought to look like with each other. And this is what I pray for the church. I pray that this is the type of love that we would have for each other. Paul says it this way. He says, this is what love looks like. He says, love never fails. Love never fails. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. What is love? Love is patient, it's kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it's not proud. It's not rude, it's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, and it keeps no records of wrong, and it does not delight in evil. So Paul warns us, in the Christian faith, as we navigate this life, there are going to be moments where we may disagree with one another on disputable matters, not significant matters. So how do we live in harmony with each other? How do we make sure that we are uplifting and being the church that God has called us to be? Well, Paul says, hold those convictions. Don't loosen those convictions, hold them. But at the same time, for the sake of one another, come and meet in the middle. Understand each other. And be willing to let go of your rights for the sake of each other. Always operating with this emotion called love. And as we do that as a church, and what Paul was saying is as the church in Rome would do that, they would be a good testimony of what it means to be God's redeemed people to the world. And so church, as we continue to navigate COVID, I want to encourage you, it is good to hold our convictions. But in disputable matters, let's find ways that we can come into the middle, love one another, and what that means is laying down our rights, hearing each other, understanding each other, respecting each other, and making sure that we have a testimony to our world that is strong and unified, and one that displays love. So as we continue to go through navigate COVID, I want to encourage you to let love rule. To let love rule in your heart, in your lives, in your speech, in every aspect and every facet of your life. And as we do that, may we be the church that is displayed Christ's love to our world. God bless you. Hopefully that is an encouragement to you.